St.Isaac Jogues, S.J., was a Jesuit priest, missionary and martyr who traveled and worked among the Iroquois, Huron, and other native populations in North America. He was the first European to name Lake George, calling it Lac du Saint Sacrement. In 1646, Jogues was martyred by the Mohawk at the village of Otenanon, south of the Mohawk River. Jogues, Jean de Brébeuf and 6 other martyred missionaries, all Jesuit priests or laymen associated with them, were canonized by the Roman Catholic Church in 1930. They are known as the North American Martyrs. A shrine was built in their honor at Torresville, New York, out of site formerly believed to be that of the Mohawk village. The feast day is celebrated on September 26 in Canada, and on October 19 in the United States of America. Early life and education. Isaacjogues was born on January 10, 1607, in Orléans, France, into a bourgeois family, where he was the 5th of 9 children. He was educated at home until the age of 10, at which point he began attending Jesuit schools. In 1624, at the age of 17, he entered the Jesuit novitiate at Rouen in northern France. Here, his master of novices was Louis Lallemant. The master, Louis Lallemant, already had 2 brothers and a nephew serving as missionaries in the colony of New France. Jogues professed simple vows in 1626, and went to study philosophy at the Royal College of La Flèche. In 1629, he went to teach humanities to young boys in Rouen. The Jesuit community had a strong missionary spirit, beginning in 1625 with the first mission to New France. Its teachers included missionary pioneers Edmond Massé, and later, Jean de Brébeuf. These Jesuit missionaries inspired Jogues, and he aspired to follow in the footsteps. In 1633, Jogues was sent to the Collège de Clermont in Paris to pursue his studies in theology. By 1636, he was ordained as a priest at Clermont. Early missions. Jogues was inspired by the missionaries that had returned to France in 1636. Father Brébeuf, Father Charles Lallemant and Father Master ventured to New France. These missionaries told Jogues of the hardships, treacheries and tortures which ordinarily awaited them by the native population as missionaries in New France. Their accounts, however, increased Jogues' desire to devote himself to labor for the conversion and welfare of the natives. Soon after Jogues was ordained a priest in January 1636, he accepted service in the missions and embarked to New France with several other missionaries. Jogues was assigned as a missionary to the Huron and Algonquin peoples. Both were allies of the French in Quebec. Jogues sailed from France on the 8th of April 1636, and 8 weeks later his ship dropped anchor in the Baie des Chaleurs. Jogues arrived in Quebec only several weeks later on the 2nd of July. On arrival, Jogues wrote to his mother, "I do not know it is to enter heaven, but this I know that it would be difficult to experience in this world a joy more excessive and more overflowing than I felt in setting foot in the New World, and celebrating my first Mass on the day of visitation." Jogues joined Jean de Brébeuf, the superior of the Jesuit mission, at the settlement on Lake Huron, the village of St. Joseph, on the 11th of September. Upon his arrival, Jogues was stricken by fever. Soon thereafter, a similar epidemic broke out among other Jesuits and the native people of the village. Due to recurring epidemics, the Hurons blamed the Blackcoats, as they called the Jesuits, threatening to kill them all. Father Brébeuf conciliated them, and by the following year relations had improved, as evidenced by one of his reports. "We are gladly heard, and there is scarcely a village that has not invited us to go to it. And at last it is understood from our whole conduct that we have not come to buy skins or to carry on any traffic, but solely to teach them, and to procure them the soul's health." For years, Jogues lived in the village of St. Joseph and learned the ways and language of the Hurons. The missionaries accommodated themselves to the customs and food of the savages as much as possible to show the Indians that they intended to share the life. Gradually, the native people began to accept Jogues. This did not last long, however, as there were some Indians who had been among the English and Dutch settlers to the south who spread reports that the missionaries brought calamity wherever they went and that they had in consequence been driven out of Europe. Jogues traveled with Garnier to Petun, a historical First Nations band government located in modern-day southern Ontario, also known as the Tobacco Nation for the chief commodity crop. The natives of the village were so uninviting to the missionaries that the fathers thought it would be impossible to do any missionary work among them. The rumors that had encircled them spread to the village and quickly discovered that their cause was just as hopeless as in the former place. They traveled from village to village until after a couple of months they decided that they could not continue to do the missionary work. Their luck changed, however, when in 1639, the new superior of the Jesuit mission, Father Jerome Lalemant, entrusted the building of Fort Ste. Marie to Jogues. In September 1641, Jogues and Charles Rainbow went into the territory of the Sauteurs. They were welcomed by some 2,000 Indians upon their arrival. Jogues settled down to the duties of a resident missionary at St. Mary's for some time. Capture by the Iroquois. On August 3, 1642, Jogues, Guillaume Couture, René Goupil, and a group of Christian Hurons were heading back from Trois-Rivières to Quebec City when they were waylaid by a war party of the Mohawk Nation, part of Iroquois Confederacy. Jogues allegedly hid in reeds and bushes, but decided to leave his hiding place to join the prisoners so that he could comfort them and ensure that the faith in Christianity remained strong. Shortly thereafter, and in retaliation for comforting a tortured Frenchman who had just killed a Mohawk, the Mohawk beat Jogues with sticks, tore out his fingernails, then gnawed the ends of his fingers until finger bones were visible. The war party then took the captives on a treacherous journey to a Mohawk village, during which worms began to fester in Jogues' wounds. Thereat the villagers turned out en masse and tortured the prisoners by marching them through a gauntlet, which consisted of rows of Iroquois armed with rods and sticks beating the prisoners walking in single file. Afterwards, the Iroquois forced Jogues and the prisoners onto an elevated platform where they were mocked. A captive Algonquin woman then cut off Jogues' thumb. At night, the prisoners were tied spread-eagled in a cabin. Children threw burning coals onto the bodies. 3 days later, Jogues and the prisoners were marched from one village to another, where the Iroquois flogged them in gauntlets, and jabbed sticks into the wounds and sores. At the third village, Jogues was hung from a wooden plank made of intersecting pieces of wood, and nearly lost consciousness, until an Iroquois had pity on him and cut him free. Throughout his captivity, Jogues comforted, baptized, heard confession from, and absolved the other prisoners. Instead of being put to death or integrated into a Mohawk family, Jogues remained a captive at large, perpetually malnourished and inadequately dressed for the harsh winters. He spent his days gathering wood, praying, and proselytizing his captors. His enslavement was likely seen as even more humiliating due to the fact that gathering wood was, for the most part, the task of Iroquois women. Seeking solace in his faith, Jogues prayed so intensely that he had visions. In one, he suddenly appeared in a bookstore covered in crosses, and bought a book that reminded him that, to enter into heaven, it was necessary to experience many tribulations. His captivity dragged on, lasting between 8 and 10 months, during which he was kept in a state of severe malnourishment and exposure to the cold. Some noteworthy incidents that occurred during this period were when he saved the life of a pregnant woman that had fallen into a deep fast-flowing creek during the winter, and when he baptized the Iroquois man who had freed him from the wooden torture device. A party of Dutch traders from Fort Orange, including the Reformed minister Johannes Megapolensis, ransomed him and gave him money for passage down the Hudson River to New Amsterdam and a return to France. Jogues was the first Catholic priest to visit Manhattan Island. For there, he sailed back to France, where he was greeted with surprise and joy. Return to France. Pope Urban VIII considered Jogues a living martyr, and gave him dispensation to say Mass with his mutilated hand. Under church law of the time, the Blessed Sacrament could not be touched with any fingers but the thumb and forefinger. Jogues was unable to follow this law after the loss of 2 fingers while in Iroquois captivity, resulting in the requirement for dispensation by the Pope. Jogues visited his mother in Orleans, but was eager to return to the missions. Jogues experienced regret over his time in captivity, and a longing for martyrdom that motivated his return to New France in 1644 after only a year and a half in France, first to Quebec, followed by a trip to Wendake. Returned to New France and there. In the spring of 1646, Jogues returned to Iroquois territory, along with Jean de Lalande, to act as the French ambassador to the Mohawk. His ambassadorship was intended to maintain the tentative peace reached in 1645 between the Iroquois and the French, the Huron and the Algonquin. This was done to ensure a safe passage for trade and travel along the east-west corridor. Jogues and Lalande were met with hesitation upon their arrival, as some Mohawk regarded missionaries as evil practitioners of foreign magic. The Europeans transmitted European diseases, such as smallpox and measles, that spread among Native Americans. These diseases resulted in high fatality rates among the Mohawk, who lacked immunity to the new diseases. When the Mohawk suffered yet another outbreak of infectious disease and crop failure at Osenanon, they blamed these unfortunate events on Catholic paraphernalia left behind by the Jesuits, which the Mohawks perceived as magically harmful. Additionally, as a result of his previous experience on the territory, Jogues demonstrated an uncanny knowledge of the territory, which the Mohawks perceived as threatening. On October 18, 1646, the Iroquois killed Jogues with a tomahawk, an axe held with one hand. They killed Lalande the next day. The Mohawk threw the missionaries' bodies into the Mohawk River. The killing seems to have been the work of an anti-French faction within the Mohawk community. The story holds a curious double martyrdom of Jogues. Aboriginal allies of the French captured Jogues' killer in 1647 and condemned him to death. While awaiting his execution, this man was baptized and renamed with the Christian name of Father Isaacjogues. His death represented a secondary martyring of Isaacjogues. Attitudes towards martyrdom. Jogues' refusal to escape, and the way that he embraced torture, demonstrates a selflessness that might be difficult for a secular, modern-day reader to understand. Jogues did not flinch from death because, like many other Jesuits in New France, he believed that being martyred would mean partaking in the torment that Jesus had endured on the cross. This would indicate his acceptance into the pantheon of heroes whose physical and spiritual strength had been equal to the cruel persecutions inflicted on the primitive church. Jogues is quoted as saying, "He was making us share his sufferings, and admitting us to participation in his crosses." At another point, Jogues speaks of the procession beginning to enter this narrow way of paradise. It was indeed then that I could say with my Lord and Master, Supra dorsum meum fabricavat peccators. Sinners have built and left monuments and marks of the rage upon my back. Jogues regarded his torture, and the death he thought would follow, as allowing him to imitate, and thus participate in, the Passion of Jesus. It is also important to realize that for the Jesuits, dying as a martyr was not really death at all. Rather, it was a way of achieving eternal life in heaven. Veneration and legacy. Jogues was canonized on June 29, 1930 by Pope Pius XI along with 7 other Canadian martyrs. His feast day is celebrated on September 26 in Canada, and on October 19 in the United States. Jogues' actions have a large impact on how he is remembered by the Jesuit and Catholic communities alike. There are a multitude of buildings and monuments dedicated to Jogues. The largest of these monuments is the Shrine of the North American Martyrs, built in Orisville, New York in 1930. It honors Jogues, René Goupil, and Louis Lalande. It was completed in 1930. The shrine also honors Jean de Brébeuf and 5 of his companions, who were killed in Canada in 1648 and 1649. There is also the Martyrs shrine located in Midland, Ontario, Canada, which honors the Canadian martyrs. A seasonal chapel on the east shore of Saratoga Lake, New York is named after Jogues. A statue of Jogues stands in front of the main entrance to the chapel that faces the lake. While he was being taken into captivity, Jogues is said to have been the first European to see this lake. Another statue of Jogues was erected in 1939, in the village of Lake George, in the Battlefield Park by the lake. Camp Pont-de-Cinq, a Roman Catholic youth camp located in Ozark, Illinois, is named after Jogues' Mohawk name. The living quarters for campers are each named for one of the North American martyrs, as well as St. Catherine Tekakwitha, Jean de Brébeuf, S.J., Noel Chabanel, S.J., Antoine Daniel, S.J., Charles Garnier, S.J., René Goupil, S.J., Jean de Lalande, S.J., and Gabriel Lalemant, S.J.